right now, I mean, today, the most heavily guarded borders on Earth aren't, rivers or mountain ranges or big concrete walls.
Not at all.
Right. They are these high security fences wrapping around massive windowless humming buildings filled with servers and cooling fans.
Yeah. And the crazy part is the laws inside those buildings aren't determined by the country they actually sit in.
Exactly. They're dictated by a corporate boardroom that's like thousands of miles away.
It really is a fundamental restructuring of global power. I mean, we're looking at a hard pivot from the old geopolitical consensus to this completely new reality.
Where sovereign territory is essentially just leased to the highest bidder.
Right, exactly.
So it is Friday, March 20, 2026, and while you are probably wrapping up your week, maybe getting ready for the weekend, a massive geopolitical shift is happening right now in real time.
Yeah, big tech CEOs aren't just lobbying world leaders anymore.
No, they are sitting across the table from heads of state, negotiating for actual physical territory. So today we have this incredible exclusive briefing from the Capital Clarity Intelligence Pillar.
It's a fascinating document.
It really is. And our mission for this deep dive is to unpack what they call the digital land grab. We're looking at what is honestly the most significant shift in the whole concept of the nation state since the Treaty of Westphalia.
Right, which established modern borders back in 1648.
Mhm.
And that Westphalia comparison is just crucial here.
It's about geography, right?
Exactly. For nearly 400 years, global stability has relied on this idea that a government has absolute authority within its drawn geographic lines.
Right?
But we're moving away from that old system, that sort of fragile, just-in-time supply chain model of global trade.
Yeah, the one we've relied on forever.
Right. It's shifting into this highly localized, heavily fortified, just-in-case reality. Basically, we're witnessing the rise of the subscription state.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the core mechanism driving this entire shift is a number we all need to understand. I mean, we all know big tech capital expenditure is massive.
Oh, absolutely.
So, hearing that Alphabet, Google's parent company, is doubling its infrastructure spend to $185 billion this year alone.
Which is just a staggering number.
Right. But it isn't necessarily a surprise to anyone following tech in 2026. We know the compute demands of AI are just astronomical.
Yeah, the power draw alone is insane.
Exactly. But the brief points out that it's not the dollar amount that matters here, right? It's the sovereign application of that money.
Right. $185 billion is literally larger than the entire GDP of many mid-sized nations.
Wow.
And you have to look at why traditional corporate expansion models don't work for this kind of spend anymore. I mean, these new AI data centers require so much power.
And water for cooling, right?
Yes, so much cooling and massive footprints of real estate. A tech giant can't just, rent out an office park in the suburbs.
No, they need specialized mega structures.
Exactly. And when you're sinking that much capital into a single physical location, you absolutely cannot afford local political instability.
Right. You need absolute, unwavering control over that space.
You do. Which brings us to the concept of cloud embassies.
And this is where it stops being just standard corporate economics and becomes deeply entrenched geopolitics.
Precisely. These aren't just generic server farms. They are protected, overseas data vaults functioning as sovereign enclaves on foreign soil.
Which sounds like sci-fi, but it's happening through legal loopholes, right? Like those frameworks in the EU Cloud and AI Development Act.
Right, and we need to look at how that actually functions on the ground. Because under these frameworks, these digital embassies are legally allowed to bypass local host country laws.
Because of intellectual property.
Exactly. The tech companies argue that their AI models and proprietary data weights are critical IP. So they have to be protected from local state espionage or even just sudden regulatory shifts.
So they operate entirely under the jurisdiction of wherever their corporate headquarters is based.
Right, whether that's California, Brussels, wherever.
To make the mechanics of this real for you listening, think about a traditional physical embassy. Like, if you are in Tokyo and you walk through the gates of the French embassy.
You're legally standing on French soil.
Right. The local Tokyo police cannot just kick down the door and serve a warrant without permission. The laws of Japan literally stop at the gate.
Exactly.
Now take that exact same legal immunity, but apply it to a 50-acre complex of humming AI infrastructure in a developing nation.
The local government has zero jurisdiction over the data flowing through those servers,
Yeah.
even though it's sitting right there in their own backyard.
Right. And there's this striking imagery from the Capital Clarity dossier that really stuck with me. They described it like a server standing like a king piece on a geopolitical chessboard,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
or a crown made entirely of microchips and circuits.
That's a great visual. And what's fascinating here is the profound implication of that legal maneuver.
Yeah. Because it changes the map.
It doesn't just redraw the map. When a server farm situated in a smaller nation operates entirely under foreign corporate laws, the traditional map has effectively been deleted.
Right. Territorial integrity just dissolves the moment you plug into the mainframe.
Exactly. The host nation is effectively carving out a piece of its own sovereign land and handing the keys over to a CEO.
But, okay, why would any country agree to that? That's what we really need to figure out here. If these tech giants have their own laws on foreign soil, how does that affect the local citizens living just down the street?
Well, leads us directly into this idea of corporate governance stepping in to replace traditional state services.
Because the host nation desperately needs what the corporation has.
Yes. Once a tech giant establishes that level of physical and legal dominance in a region, they stop being mere businesses. They elevate to a completely new status.
Right, what the brief calls anchor customers.
Exactly. They become the anchor customers of entire nations.
And the anchor customer dynamic is so important to grasp. I mean, think of it like a massive department store at a suburban shopping mall.
Right.
The mall developers know they absolutely need that massive anchor store to bring in foot traffic, to legitimize the space. So because the mall is desperate,
They give the anchor store whatever lease terms they want. Free rent, dedicated parking, total control over their signage.
exactly, but here we're applying that to macroeconomics.
Right. So a smaller nation, maybe they're struggling with national debt or they're lagging behind in the global tech race, they view this as an economic lifeline.
To get a slice of that $185 billion pie.
Exactly. So they willingly agree to what are called private-public charters.
And this is where it gets crazy.
It does. Suddenly, the tech company isn't just running its own servers behind closed doors. Because they have the only localized compute power capable of running modern systems, they literally begin managing essential day-to-day government functions.
For the host country, we are talking about critical civic infrastructure. The tech giants' algorithms start handling, like, local tax collection.
Maintaining public health registries.
Yes. And managing the digital identity verification for the actual citizens of that country.
Because the host nation simply cannot afford to build a competing AI infrastructure on its own, they essentially lease the capacity from the Cloud Embassy.
But in doing so, they integrate the corporation's terms of service directly into their own civic foundation.
We do.
Okay, I have to push back here because this sounds incredibly abstract. Are we literally saying that in these specific nations, my citizenship is about to be replaced by a corporate subscription?
Well,
Because the blurring of lines between a citizen and a user is just surreal. How does a country even function when a CEO's terms of service start superseding local constitutional laws?
this raises an important question, and it is the absolute core of the subscription state model.
Okay, let's hear it.
Let's look at the mechanics. In this setup, citizenship is no longer treated as this inherent human right granted just by your birthplace.
Right.
It becomes a tier of service.
Mhm.
Basic citizenship benefits like access to rapid transit, priority medical care at public hospitals, expedited business licenses.
It all becomes tied to the platform.
Exactly. It's increasingly tied to your platform loyalty and your ecosystem usage.
So, to ground this in your daily life as a listener, imagine you are a resident in one of these charter cities.
Right.
If you use the tech giants' payment apps, run your small business on their software, use their AI assistants, your life is totally frictionless.
The system recognizes you as a highly integrated user. You get the premium citizen experience. Your permits clear instantly.
Right. But if you opt out,
Right.
or if you prefer to use a competitor's open source software,
The system prioritizes you. You're essentially treated as a second-class citizen in your own hometown, simply because you aren't fully subscribed to the anchor customer's ecosystem.
that is just, wow. But initially, the host country welcomes this, right?
Oh, completely. The immediate financial windfall of hosting one of these hubs is massive. I mean, overnight, a struggling nation gets next-generation infrastructure, thousands of high-paying tech jobs, a huge influx of foreign capital.
They see it as a shortcut.
Exactly. A shortcut to becoming the next global innovation hub.
Right, but that frictionless premium citizenship relies on a massive, dangerous assumption, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That the tech giant's goals will always align with the host nation's needs.
Yes.
And the moment those priorities diverge, well, here's where it gets really interesting, because this leads to what economists call the silicon trap.
The silicon trap is where the reality of this power imbalance truly sets in. It's a clinical, high-stakes auction, and the tech giants hold absolutely all the leverage.
Because they can go anywhere.
Right, because these corporations can essentially build their cloud embassies anywhere. With a reliable power grid and a good cooling source, they force nations to bid against each other in this brutal race to the bottom.
They demand permanent tax
A
exemptions.
waiving of local labor laws.
They negotiate sovereign concessions that, frankly, traditional physical industries could never dream of obtaining.
And this creates what the briefing calls digital monocultures.
Right, which is a great term.
We know from agriculture that planting only one type of crop is incredibly dangerous. If a specific disease hits,
The entire farm dies.
exactly. Now we are seeing small nations turning their entire macroeconomic structures into digital monocultures, becoming completely dependent on a single company's algorithm for their survival.
It reminds me of another image from the Capital Clarity file. They described this glowing digital map bleeding dollar signs directly into a massive corporate skyscraper.
Oh, right.
It's like the company towns of the Industrial Revolution, but scaled up to an entire national level.
Yes. But wait, we have to look at the leverage, because you might think a tech giant might run the transit app and the tax registry, but the local government still has a military, right?
Yeah, that was my exact thought. Like, tax collection is backed by the threat of state violence. You pay or you go to prison. So if a tech company tries to dictate constitutional law, what is stopping the host nation's military from simply driving a tank up to the Cloud Embassy, cutting the fiber cables, and taking their sovereignty back?
And that is the exact vulnerability traditional states look for.
Hmm.
But it doesn't work against decentralized cloud architecture.
Because the data isn't really just in that one building.
Exactly. If a local military cuts the fiber optic cable, the AI simply routes its processing to another node halfway across the world. You cannot capture the data by holding the building hostage.
Wow.
But more importantly, the tech giant doesn't need to use physical force. They don't need a private army. They rely on the ultimate leverage, the pullout threat.
Okay, explain how that pullout threat actually works in practice.
Well, if the host nation tries to push back, say they want to raise taxes or to enforce a new labor law, the corporation doesn't fight a ground war. They just threaten to leave.
And they actually can.
Right. In a traditional economy, a massive automotive plant couldn't just pack up and move the factory overnight, but a tech giant. If a neighboring country offers a slightly better tax rate, they can migrate their critical operations with a few keystrokes.
And if they execute that pullout, what happens to the country?
The local economy doesn't just experience a dip. It collapses instantly,
Overnight.
literally overnight, because the tech giant was running the civic infrastructure, the local tax collection system, the digital identity grid, the transit networks. They all go dark.
Or become totally obsolete the second API access is revoked.
Exactly. The host nation is paralyzed. They don't have the compute power to spin up replacements.
It's basically the British East India Company all over again.
That is a perfect historical parallel.
Right. I mean, in the 17th and 18th centuries, the East India Company wasn't just trading spices. They had private armies, they collected local taxes in India, and they operated entirely outside the jurisdiction of local rulers.
Because they controlled the critical infrastructure of global trade.
Exactly. And today, the infrastructure isn't shipping routes, it's data processing.
Right. The East India Company leveraged economic dependency to extract wealth and rewrite local laws, which is exactly what the Silicon Trap achieves today.
It's wild to think about.
The long-term loss of regulatory control over your citizens' data heavily outweighs the initial allure of becoming an AI hub. You are essentially selling the foundation of your house to buy a much nicer roof.
It's an incredibly fragile position for any country to be in. So having established the massive risks of these digital monocultures.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean? If the traditional nation state is being systematically sold off today in 2026, what do the next 10 years look like for you, the listener?
Well, looking ahead to the next decade, these geopolitical shifts are only going to accelerate. Analysts predict that more and more developing nations will aggressively bid to host these decentralized corporate headquarters.
The migration of power is just flowing relentlessly from the capital city to the server farm.
It is. However, there is a potential countermeasure gaining some traction. It's a new legal framework proposed in the briefing known as digital neutrality.
Okay, digital neutrality. How does a legal framework actually enforce anything against a tech giant spending $185 billion a year?
Well, it focuses on the rights of the individual rather than the territory of the state.
Mhm.
Digital neutrality is the concept that citizens must maintain their fundamental rights across both physical and virtual jurisdictions.
Like a digital Geneva Convention?
That's a great way to put it. The goal is to establish an international treaty ensuring that an individual does not lose their constitutional protections the moment their personal data interacts with a cloud embassy.
So the rules apply to the data itself, not the physical building it happens to be processed in.
Exactly. It demands that basic human rights supersede corporate terms of service, regardless of where the server is physically located.
Okay, so if your local government outsources your identity verification to a foreign tech giant,
Digital neutrality would legally ensure that the tech giant cannot leverage that data to discriminate against you or strip you of your civic rights.
there is that final piece of visual evidence from the briefing, a golden server rack sitting on a remote island with a robotic hand literally using a quill to write the new laws of the land.
Is quite the image.
It really perfectly captures this because this entire transition forces us to look at the evolving friction between constitutional rights and corporate efficiency.
Right.
The convenience of a perfectly optimized AI-driven city is incredibly appealing. I mean, who wouldn't want that? But it requires handing over the keys to the civic engine room.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we as a global society have to decide what this moment represents.
Right.
Does this era of corporate sovereignty mark the tragic end of the traditional nation state? Or is it simply a necessary, albeit painful, upgrade for a hyper-connected world that has outgrown its old geographic borders?
It's a heavy, complex reality.
It really is.
So, to briefly recap how we got here today, we started by looking at Alphabet's massive $185 billion infrastructure pivot and explored the legal mechanisms that allow for the creation of those extraterritorial cloud embassies.
Right, deleting the map.
Exactly. Then we examined how the lure of tech dominance leads nations straight into the silicon trap, forcing them to trade their legal jurisdiction away under the threat of economic collapse.
The pull-out threat.
Yeah. And finally, we broke down the mechanics of the subscription state, where corporate terms of service actively replace civic duty and constitutional rights.
It is a total reimagining of what it means to belong to a society, what it means to be a citizen.
And as we close out this deep dive, I want to bring this right back to you, the listener. As global power migrates to the server farm, remember that it is your personal data, your digital identity, and your physical reality that make up the squares on this new sovereign chessboard.
Very true.
Yeah.
And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over as you head into your weekend.
Let's hear it.
We discussed how the subscription state ties your basic rights and civic benefits to your loyalty to a tech ecosystem. So ask yourself, what happens the day your account gets flagged, suspended, or permanently banned?
Oh, wow.
In a world where your government services run on a corporate server, does losing your digital access mean losing your real-world human rights?
That is an essential question to ask as these systems are being built all around us. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, keep your eyes open, and never stop questioning the changing borders of your digital world. We will catch you next time.